So now the next thing now is, how do you do the documentation? How do you document all of these things that you've designed, so that on a glance of it, the person that will be handling the code, the design, which is you understand, but should in case you are just working on just the UI UX alone, so the person handling it would know what and what to do at a glance. How do you do that? So this is how you can do that, or how you can achieve that. So to document while designing, what you do is that you open side by side your document, open a notepad. We all have notepad. You will just open a note, you take a note. Open a notepad. If you're using Windows, like Notepad. If you're using Mac, what notepad is in Mac? Text. Text what? TextMate. Okay. Alright, for people using Windows, just in case anybody listening later. So this is it. So you open your notepad side by side. Your notepad side by side. What you're trying to do is to take notes. So on your Adobe XD, what you would do is that, remember what we said in our last class, we are creating based on components, isn't it? Everything we have on our page are what we see them as what? Components, as elements. They are elements and they are components, isn't it? Yes. Right? So now you check on your design, on this your design, the first, I've cleaned it. The first page is the what? The splash screen, isn't it? So what are the components you have on your splash screen?
Just the
Logo. So this is now what you do. On your notepad, you could choose to, it's best you use the notepad because you're working on the system at the same time. If not, I said you use your notebook, but it is not it's not the best approach, because it will be very easy for you to transfer what you've written on your notepad digitally to other team members, do you get, or to also save it in the cloud than transferring what you've written on paper to the cloud, you understand? So it's very easy to use this. So what you do is that you list out the components, you get, like on the splash screen. So what you do, you say splash screen. So what does splash screen identify? Is like a page. The first word, splash screen. Splash screen. So you can write it, take note of it. Okay. So you write it on your notepad like splash screen. Alright. So the best way to do our documentation, I was saying something about writing casing. You know lowercase, the way we have something like this. This is lowercase, isn't it? Yeah, this is what?
Uppercase.
Uppercase. Then what do you call this? When you start with smaller case and the next one is capital K. So there is, I'll write it as an assignment, naming how to naming pattern in software development. So for example, then write e.g. camel case. I don't know if you've heard of camel case.
Naming what?
Naming pattern in software development. File naming pattern or variable naming pattern in software development. Just take note of it. We'll get to that when we start programming this UI UX design. We'll get to that fully, but just write it on the side so that you can read about it. So our next class will continue. So let's continue. Let's continue, please. Okay. So in our documentation, so we'll have first here something like this. Splash screen, it is like the page. You can say splash screen page. So under splash screen page, alright. So under the splash screen page, what are those components we have on the splash screen page? On that splash screen, what's the first component? What was the first thing you drew?
The logo.
No, it's not the logo.
Okay, the color.
It's not the
First
color.
thing you do?
Yes, the first thing you drew on that. When we were doing that layout, what was the first thing?
Is it menu bar?
No, so it's not many box. No, first we drew the rectangle box.
Okay. Oh, okay.
You understand? So that is an element on its own.
Yeah.
Yes. That box you drew and you added color to it is an element on its own. So here you now come and say what name, what's that element? So now in this now you start learning how to give your elements name preferred to you. This time around is a preferred name for you. You could choose to call that long box that you draw Nandi or anything, or a hair screen what?
Dimension.
Screen dimension, or you can call it something else. But there's a common terminology that most people just prefer to use it to call it. Most developers, they call it container. Do you get? Some people call it container, some people call it wrapper, because it is wrapping every other thing. Every other thing is wrapped inside. Every other component is inside. So some people call it wrapper, but one of the most common terminology to use is container. Do you get? So don't see that container is a very complex thing. They just call it container because it's very easy for everybody globally to understand what they mean by saying container, because inside it will contain other components. You get? So now let's call that our rectangle that we drew. We'll call it container, isn't it? So now in software development and in programming, there is a pattern in styling. So I just want us to use the same sequence in learning how to document, so that as we are transiting from documentation to actually designing this thing, it's very easy for you to understand when we get to that place. You understand? So when naming the components, you just put hash in front. So you say hash what? Container. In lowercase, all in lowercase. So when you do this, remember we are still what? Under, you can, let's say, asterisk. Please, I would prefer if you can write this. Please write it so that once your system is up, you can replicate it. So we say hash what? What's the first component you have? The container, isn't it? Yes. And this container, we did what to the container? We gave the container some features. Like we give the container some features. So like what are those things we applied to the container after drawing the first box? Color, isn't it? So the container, we gave it color. Not just color, but what? A background color, isn't it? Some container, we give it what? Width. That container has a width. It has a dimension. You get? It has a height, isn't it? So now for this particular component, all of those things, all of those features, all of those things we give that component, we'll call them the component's properties. The properties of that component. You understand? So what is the properties of that container in your splash screen? One of the property. By property, I mean what is one of those features, what is one of those characteristics that makes up that component, that component have. I don't know if we're understanding.
Yes.
Are we getting it?
Yes.
Are we getting it? Are you sure? Alright. So what are those features that component has? So we'll list it. Is it clear? Do I need to use a different thing to make example so you understand?
No, it's fine. The container, then the color, then
Yes.
the component features.
All of
Isn't it? Everything
No.
that is inside the components.
everything that makes that container is the properties
Properties.
of the container. Just like this is the building, this color is a property of this office. This AC is a property of this office. This color here is a property. The dimension is a property of what? This office. You understand? So to do that, to list all of the properties that belongs to that particular component, this is what you do. After writing the name of the component, right, with hash container, you do like this. You open a curly bracket and then you close the curly bracket. Meaning, for instance, let me explain this for us. You all know what bracket means now in English language. When you have a sentence and you have something in bracket, that word in bracket is trying to do or tell you that what this thing is saying is actually giving emphasis to what was said before, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
So the same thing also to this. What we are doing is like saying all of these things in this bracket, isn't it? All of these things in this bracket are giving emphasis to what makes up this guy. You understand? But instead of using bracket, we use that style bracket. What do they call it? Curly bracket. It's a curly bracket. Understand? So instead of using that, you can use a curly bracket. And there are different ways to do that. So you see, you can just do like this. Curly bracket open, curly bracket close. Under the what? The name of the component, isn't it? But some people just choose to put it in front, then leave this other one here, so that this one will not occupy unnecessary space. Do you get? Are you following?
Yes.
Do you understand? Sure.
Understood.
Sure.
If there's any question we ask,
You ask me. I want to make sure that everything is very comprehensive. All right. So this is it. So inside this bracket of this container, we now do what? List all of our properties. So what's one of the properties of that container?
Color.
Is it color or background color?
Background.
So what's the difference between background color and color?
Background color.
Yes. What's the difference between background color and color?
Background color fill up the container.
Fill up the container, like is the background of the container, right? So how about color?
Color is
So assignment number 2, what's the difference between background color and color? Write it. You check it. I'll give you a hint and a clue. I'll say I will answer it, but let's just write it sharp. Then you tell me by next week. So
you said
difference between background color and color. And if you are searching all of these things, please let it be related to design or programming, so that you're not going to be seeing a different explanation. So difference between background color and color in programming. So this is it. So we said background color, right? So this is now what you do. You say, please let's follow up. Let's follow up. Okay, I still right. So you come here, you write the property. Okay, I think we'll need the green one since you said it's here. Let's have it. The green marker.
okay.
Oh, this is too much of opening. Get the extra markers. You spring the sea so out the water.
Let me talk.
This is also permanent.
Is it permanent?
Yes, it's on the protein. See, it's permanent. This one is board marker. This is permanent. Okay, let's see how we manage this for.
Okay, this is board marker.
Yes, then this one's a permanent one. This is type we use in marking stuff. Well, let's continue. Let's just continue this. Let's continue this. So you come into this place and then you write the property. So the first one we said is what? Remember, everything is in what? Lowercase. Please take note. Everything is in lowercase. Background. Write it. Background dash color. Then you put what? See it. You list it. It's like a subtopic. Background color. Background hyphen color. Then you put a semicolon. Dot. So what's the next property? What's the next property? The height. The height of the container. Height. We added height. Then what's the next property? Width. Then what's the next property again? Is there any other property?
Is it the logo?
Logo. Logo is what? A component. Do you get? It is a different element or component that is what inside the other component. Do you get? So now this is the properties. We have what? How many properties here? Background color, height, and width. So if you look at that your design now, you see background color. So now outside properties. So what are the values of these properties? All right. So thank you. So what are the values of these properties? For the background color, what's the value? We said background color. Right? Background color. What's the background color? By value, I mean what is the background color you used?
It's a decimal code, but you can call it green for now.
Green, right? Green. So, what's the height? What was the height that was used? What height did you use? You didn't check.
The iPhone 13, but
just
normally it's 1920.
So that's it. So when designing all of these things, you take note of it because the guy too, to make the work easier for you when you are coding it, so that once he goes to height, you just apply the height. Do you understand? So all of these things, height, you put it. It could be in what pixels. Most times, let's say 500 px. Then the width, let's say 250 px, because it's not like the same thing. It's not like a perfect rectangle, so it's longer than this. So for the color, I think we're rounding up here. So for the color, this is green, but that is not exact green. That is like a shade of a green. So how do you know a shade of green? How do you know a shade of a particular color?
So decimal code.
We know before we go to hexadecimal, you know the RGB, the primary colors. Arrow means red, green, blue. So with these three colors, you can mix it to have any color. Likewise, painting. Those are the three colors you can use to get any color. So you can use that now. Assignment, you just go and check. Assignment, read up on coloring in design based on color codes. Color codes. Assignment. What is color code, or what are color codes in design? What are color codes in UI and UX designing? So that's what we'll stop for today. What are color codes in UI and UX designing? So is there any question? Like what I said, or what?
I was going to ask. The question would be more like. More like why are we naming like as if we are coding in XD?
This right?
Yes.
Remember, we are not coding, no. We are just doing what? We are just documenting.
Why is it
looking documentation looking as if we are coding?
Yes.
Okay, why I want us to do it this way is so that it will be very easier for you when you start designing, when you start coding your design. You understand?
It's not like it's general practice.
It's not as if it's a general practice.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It is not a general. There is no general practice, though, like in style of writing your codes. Documentation. No. There's nothing like general practice that if you don't do this, no. But it is best practice. That is what is common in programming. Best practice. The only place where you see general practice is when it comes to the particular programming language. You understand? Like for instance, in Igbo, Bia cannot never mean go. Generally, do you get? Bia is come. So likewise, in programming languages, there are general practice and general way of doing things. But in this documentation, this I'm giving you is not like a general practice. It is my own way of documenting and making it very easy for you to understand what documentation is and the transitioning between. Why I'm doing this is because mostly for people that don't have idea about. So if I was taking a pro, I won't be taking the pro this way. A pro already knows what documentation is and the best way. But I'm using this approach because from here we are moving towards coding, and I need you to have an understanding of how these things work, because once you have this prerequisite and we get to that place, you won't struggle with it at that stage. You understand? That's why it's looking as if we are coding, but we are not coding, we are just documenting. Do you understand? So there's no, please, I hope you are not frightened by what you are
Don't because anyone who don't understand, we ask questions.
Please.
No, because why I asked was, we intend to further.
Yeah.
You understand? So I want to know if this is a general practice. Then we know that this is how it's done.
Yeah.
Do you understand? So when going to an organization, we know we're doing the right thing. Do you understand?
Yes, if you go into an organization and you do this, it is the right thing.
Okay.
I am telling you, like anywhere. Do you get? There is no. I'm telling this thing because I am a pro. Do you get? If you have conversations with people that are pro developers and designers, they understand these things. Do you get? So the main thing is you just need to be sure that you know what you are doing. Just like the way I'm telling you now, is because I know what I'm saying. If a professional software developer comes here and during our process of team development, and I explain to them, I give them this documentation. In fact, they will pay me extra for giving them this concept, like for real. Do you get? Because this is not something that is very common. It is a style of. This is what makes you like pro. Do you get? Your ability to make.
Your ability to not follow what everybody is following.
Yes.
Really job is that.
Come up with a very comprehensive. See, once people start seeing this sequence of documentation, I'm telling you, teams, software teams, they will start using it. They will incorporate it. Why? Because it will be very easy for them to communicate. Like the communication between their UX and UI developer, front-end developer, and you understand? So because the front-end developer that is coding does this, while they are using something called, we'll get to that part, it's called CSS, Cascading Style Sheet. They use a pattern as this. So once they open the documentation and see, what they see is, first, they know that the first page they want to start coding is what? Splash screen. You want to start designing your splash screen, and you go to splash screen, immediately you now write it somewhere that this commented that this is the component's name. Immediately they see this property, you're making their job easy in that company. Like, do you get? So don't be scared of maybe when you find yourself in the midst, or maybe a boardroom or board meeting with software developers, and you are being scared of saying something that might not be the right thing, you get. But as far as it is a gradual process, you get to that stage where you see all of these things you are doing now, but you own it. Like, do you get? You own it. You know what you are doing. Like, it's inside of you. So it won't be a matter of if I am right or wrong, but it's if what you are doing is correct. Do you get? So that's the end of, we have come to the end of our class. So let's